It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Rabbi Meir Salasnik.
Okay, you're asking me about the Levaya of Rabbi Schonfeld, Rabbi Dr. Solomon Schonfeld. First of all, I just should say I never actually met him, but of course I knew about him. I knew about him because I was born in London, and I'm British, and I had never actually met him, but he once gave my mother a job. When I was quite young, I was probably only about a year old, my mother, who had a qualification as a domestic science teacher, he needed a domestic science teacher in the, I think it was called the Avigdor School, which was in Stamford Hill. So what my mother did was she arranged for me to go to a kindergarten in that area. Now, I should point out, we were living in Walthamstow, and at that stage we didn't have a car. So one of my parents would take me to kindergarten by at least 2 buses. In fact, there may even been 3 buses. And my mother taught there 2 or 3 days a week. And there were 2 days, I can't remember which they were, but 2 days that she taught one day after the other. And her parents lived in Stamford Hill, not too far from the school. So one night she would take me she'd pick me up from kindergarten and would take me to stay with her parents. And so, although as I said, I never met Rabbi Schonfeld, he was a big name for me. I'll also mention about my father-in-law. Now, my father-in-law was a cloth dealer. He was in wholesale cloth, and he would tell the following story: that one day he opened his shop in the East End, and Rabbi Schonfeld came in and said, "I'll have that bale of cloth for my boys." And he just took this bale of cloth without even asking my father-in-law, although my father-in-law actually had no problem with this. He actually felt quite proud about it. Rabbi Schonfeld simply took the bale of cloth away. And of course what he needed was, he was putting up a number of boys. I'm not sure, and I never thought to ask my father-in-law whether this was at the beginning of the war, or just before the war, or whether this was actually boys he had brought into Britain, into London, after the war. In other words, people who had survived the Holocaust, and he brought them in. So, as I said, I've never been sure whether this was around 1939 or whether it was around 1946, 47 perhaps. So in other words, I knew of him as a very special, exceptional person. And when he died, I just happened to be, I think I was going to Jews College for a talk, and the lecturer said he wasn't going to give a talk today because Rabbi Dr. Schonfeld has died. We had to go to the funeral, so we went to the funeral. And the funeral was, when I went to the funeral, it was basically the Hespedim, the eulogies before the funeral, because this took place in, if I remember correctly, in the Das Yisrael synagogue, which he had actually been the rabbi of, although at a certain stage he became like the rabbi of the whole union of Orthodox Hebrew congregations, and I think Rabbi Duna was his successor. Rabbi Duna actually gave one of the Hespedim. What actually impressed me most, because if I recall correctly, it was a cold day, and there, as you can imagine, a lot of the boys from Hasmonean School, which of course he was the founder of, the boys from the Hasmonean school came to the Levaya. And quite naturally, there would be a number of Kohanim. So I have this memory of a group of possibly 30, maybe even 50 boys standing on the other side of the road to the shul, just watching. And of course, it was, as I say, it was a cold day, so they had to be dressed very warmly. I felt very much for them when I went into the shul for the Hespedim. One particular memory I have was and this was in Rabbi Duna's speech, where he said that there was I think it was a butcher, who Rabbi Schonfeld had a different opinion with him basically on a halakhic matter. And Rabbi Schonfeld was being over particular in the butcher's mind, and the butcher came to Rabbi Duna about it, and Rabbi Duna said to the butcher, look, you have the right, if you wish to bring Rabbi Schonfeld to the Beis Din, to have a din Torah with him. And the butcher said, but I can't do that. Rabbi Schonfeld is my father, Rabbi Schonfeld is my mother. And it was a realization that this person, however much upset he was with him on a business basis, realized that he could, just as he could never have taken his earthly parents to court, he could never take Rabbi Schonfeld to court. And that's the one part of the Levaya that I remember so well. Now, was the realization that this one man had become the parent of not only of his own family, but of thousands of other people.
He actually saved over 3,000 children.
No. Oh yes. So I thought we were going to something else. Yes.
Including the Dunner family.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Jacobovitz.
Yeah.
Were there many people at the Levaya?
My memory is that the shul was full. And now, how many people for that shul, I'm not sure, but the shul was certainly full. And of course, there were all the Kohanim outside. So there were certainly hundreds. Whether there were thousands or not, I'm not sure. Remember, of course, with a Levaya, a Levaya is always going to be at short notice.
Very short notice.
So there could be people who people who would have gone had they known, but only found out afterwards.
And it's amazing that you had never met, but you felt you had a duty to be there.
Yeah. Yes.
And subsequently, through the years, you've heard more about what Rabbi Schonfeld achieved and what his legacy.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would guess that most of what I knew already before then. Probably one just comes across other people's, different people's memories. I should point out something which relates in a sense to London geography. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Walthamstow. What is interesting is, in Walthamstow, we did not have many survivors. It was a community which was most of the people, I would guess, were born in England and were children of immigrants to England. There were a certain number of people, but not that many, who had been born abroad. So, although my father was a rabbi in Walthamstow, would speak to people in Yiddish, the language of choice between everybody was always English. In other words, Yiddish was I think there were very few people for whom Yiddish was their main language. It was sort of their extra language, their secondary language that they would use in private conversation. So the vast majority of the people there they or their parents had come to England in the late 1800s or the early 1900s. There were very few who had actually come from Germany. Whereas if I had grown up in the Northwest London area, I would have known in my childhood lots of people who had who had come on kinder transport or afterwards. In fact, I knew many such people. That was when I moved to Bushey in Hertfordshire, where I myself was a rabbi, and had quite a few survivors in my community.
And some of the survivors were the actual kinder that Rabbi Schonfeld...
The survivors I had in my community, I'm not aware of any of them having come through Rabbi Schonfeld. There were probably 3 who came. Actually, no, there were probably 4 who came. There were 4 who came on kinder transport. Others who came before, others who came. There were 2. I had at least 2 Holocaust survivors, as distinct from people who got out before the war. I'm not aware of any of them, however, having come from having come through Rabbi Schonfeld.
Okay. And what would you say was one of the greatest legacies of Rabbi Solomon Schonfeld? Having your recollections, or what you were taught?
Something was very interesting, which and I can't remember where I read. It may have even been an obituary for him, where somebody's, I think maybe one of his family, maybe one of his children, asked him if he remembered, how he feels. In other words, all the families, all the people, all the individuals he saved, and therefore the families he's created. And his response, which, if I remember correctly, was he actually thinks more of those he was unable to save. And I've come across this elsewhere, where people who do a lot, but they're aware that by comparison with everything else, in other words, however successful they were, they wish they would have been more successful. They wish they would have saved more people, and they are, we are impressed by their. We feel dwarfed by their Hatzolah, by all the things they achieved, but they themselves feel dwarfed by all that they were unable to achieve.
I think that is the greatest tribute.
Yeah.
I think that shows the greatness, the greatest. Wow. Rabbi Salasnik, I just want to thank you. It's been a really honor and a privilege to hear you, and I think it's a wonderful tribute to such a great hero, and I wish more people know and will learn of this greatness of Rabbi Schonfeld. Thank you so very much.